The first rule of interstellar diplomacy is that everyone lies. The second, Ambassador Julian Cador had decided, was that the quality of the lie directly correlated with the opulence of the room in which it was told. By that measure, the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was the most dishonest place in the known universe. The floor, a single broken expanse of polished obsidian, seemed to drink the light of 1,000 floating lumen orbs, giving back only distorted funhouse reflections of the grandeur above. The delegates' pods, carved from the psycho-resonant bone of long-dead leviathans hunted in the deep gas of Bespin's Vale, hummed with an energy that felt less like technology and more like barely contained self-importance. As he walked the long path toward the grand podium, the silence was a physical weight. Every eye in the chamber was on him, a specimen under a microscope. He felt the familiar, cold knot in his stomach, the one that the Chimera program's psycho-conditioning had been designed to suppress, but which no amount of simulated trauma could ever truly erase. It was the primal fear of the pack animal, separated and surrounded. He palmed the cool, metallic surface of the data puck in his suit's inner pocket. A faint vibration, a whisper of readiness, pulsed against his skin. If this went south, Contingency 9 was clear. It was a desperate gambit, a single shot in the dark, but all of humanity's plans were these days. He passed the Scythian delegation. Their scaled avian forms were rigid with a contempt they barely bothered to conceal, their plumed crests radiating an almost palpable smugness. High Counselor Kier, a creature of regal bearing and venomous patience, sat on a throne-like chair that had been deliberately fashioned to be just a few inches taller than everyone else's. His eyes, small, black, and unblinking, followed Julian's every step. As Julian approached, he saw Kier make a subtle, dismissive gesture with a three-taloned hand at a quivering Silene counselor. The Silene, a being whose gelatinous form communicated through shifting patterns of internal light, immediately muted its own glow to a dull, bruised purple and withdrew its motion from the docket. Julian recalled the motion, some tedious but necessary financial audit of shipping cartels operating on the fringe. The Silene fumbled with its own data puck, its entire form wavering with humiliation. Power wasn't just in what you said. It was in what you didn't have to. The memory surfaced, unbidden. A conditioning proctor, his face impassive, standing over a younger Julian.
Weakness invites aggression. Indecision invites destruction. Hesitation is a death sentence.
Julian filed the Silene's reaction away, another piece of data in a mosaic of institutional rot. He reached the podium, its surface cool and smooth under his fingertips, and faced the assembly. He was a single man in a dark, impeccably tailored suit, representing a species considered little more than loud, ambitious primates who'd stumbled upon FTL travel like children finding a loaded gun. "Counselors," he began. His breath control and vocal projection, honed through years of conditioning, ensured every word would carry to the furthest corners of the chamber without technological aid. He spoke into the silence, his tone calm and even. A stark, flat stone dropped into a pool of ornate rhetoric. "I stand before you today, not as a supplicant, but as a peer. Earth has met every metric for sovereign recognition. We have adhered to your trade laws, respected your territorial claims, and contributed to the galactic community with our technologies and our resources." He let the words hang in the air. The usual approach for an aspirant species was a display of flowery deference, a symphony of weak flattery and soft, gooey promises. Julian offered them granite, cold and unmoving. He could feel Kier's gaze on him, cold and analytical, like an entomologist studying an insect before adding it to his collection. The High Counselor despised humanity's directness, its utter refusal to play the 1,000-year-long game of insinuation veiled threats, and generational favor trading that defined council politics. Humans were impatient. They were ephemeral, and that made them dangerous. "You speak of order," Julian continued, his eyes sweeping across the delegates, meeting the multi-lensed gaze of a chitinous Hivite, the flat, placid stare of a Cygnian amphibian, the wary look of a dozen others. "You speak of stability. Yet the order you maintain is one of stagnation, and the stability you offer is the peace of the tomb. You demand we curtail our expansion, that we limit our fleet, that we submit our technological developments for council review, a process that would see our progress bleed out into the sand of your bureaucracy, our momentum lost, our spirit broken." A murmur, like the rustling of dry leaves, went through the chamber. This was not the tone of a junior species asking for a seat at the table. This was the tone of a guest pointing out the rot in the foundations of the house. "Humanity seeks partnership, not patronage. We desire a future built on mutual respect, not one dictated by fear of the unknown." He leaned forward slightly, his posture shifting from formal address to direct confrontation. His gaze finally locked with Kier's across the vast chamber. "We are not who you think we are. You see chaos in our colonies, in our politics, in our art. We see adaptation. You see ambition. We see the desperate, unyielding drive to survive, to thrive, to be better than we were yesterday." He straightened up, his hands resting lightly on the sides of the podium, his posture relaxed, open. "Humanity asks only for fairness under the laws you yourselves have written. We do not, however, beg." He finished. After his words, the chamber was a vacuum. Delegates stared, mouths or feeding orifices agape. The thousand floating lumen orbs seemed to hum louder in the absence of any other sound. It was the stunned silence of a dinner party whose guest has just accused the host of murder. Then the spell was broken by a single, almost imperceptible nod from High Counselor Kier to an aide standing in the shadows behind his throne. Julian saw it, a flicker of movement, a glint of absolute satisfaction in Kier's reptilian eyes. He also saw the flash of red light that painted a perfect circle on his chest, a targeting designator. His mind, honed by the most ruthless conditioning program in human history, did not panic. It assessed. Deniable. Architectural integration. Thermoregulation grid, weaponized. Pinpoint. Thermal. The analysis was as cold and detached as a machine's. A flood of data points that his body was already reacting to before the conclusion had fully formed. Before the first synapse could finish firing, the universe turned white. Multiple beams of focused energy, fired from emitters cleverly disguised as ornate carvings in the chamber's dome, converged on the podium. These were part of the station's thermal regulation and defense grid, powerful enough to maintain atmospheric integrity against a hull breach or vaporize incoming micrometeoroids. Kier would blame a catastrophic power conduit failure, a tragic accident, a regrettable message to any other upstarts. The beams formed a lance of incandescent fury, a needle of pure starfire that struck Julian with the force of a meteor. The podium did not just burn, it sublimated, vanishing in a flash of vaporized metal and stone. The obsidian floor beneath it turned to molten glass. The concussive blast threw the nearby delegates from their pods, their shrieks of terror lost in the roar. In the chaos, the Silene counselor's data puck was flung from its trembling manipulator appendage, skittering across the floor to land near a decorative planter filled with alien flora. For any other living being, it would have been an instantaneous, cellular-level annihilation. But Julian Cador's suit was a masterpiece of uniquely human paranoia. Woven from Charonian silk steel, a filament that could stop a railgun slug, it was merely the outer layer. Beneath it, a proprietary non-Newtonian gel was laced with a bio-integrated emergency system a desperate, last-ditch invention born from a species that knew it was surrounded by bigger, older, and meaner things. As the torrent of energy hit, the suit's neural fiber weave, key to Julian's own panicked biological spike, dumped its entire power reserve into a single, physics-defying function. For less than a microsecond, it generated a total environment stasis bubble. The field shunted the energy instead of blocking it. The bubble created a temporary microscopic pocket of warped spacetime, displacing the cataclysmic kinetic shockwave and redirecting the lethal thermal load around his body. It felt like being simultaneously crushed and torn apart while being flash-fried. The laws of physics, temporarily inconvenienced, snapped back with a vengeance. Julian was thrown backward like a doll, his body absorbing the residual concussive force that the field couldn't entirely displace. He slammed into the floor 20 feet away, a broken, smoking heap. To the horrified onlookers, it was exactly as Keir had planned. A dead human diplomat, grotesquely and publicly executed in a manner that was both terrifying and officially deniable. But Julian wasn't dead. He was bleeding from his nose and ears. His ribs felt like a bag of broken glass shards grinding against his lungs. The left side of his suit, from the shoulder down, was a scorched, blackened ruin. Acrid smoke curled from the fabric. But he was alive. The Galactic Council had just attacked a human diplomat. They had just declared war on a ghost. The chamber was a symphony of alarms and panicked shrieks. But through the bedlam, a disciplined force was already moving. Grovic enforcers, hulking gray-skinned brutes in heavy armor, pushed through the terrified crowd, their official purpose to secure the scene. Their real purpose, Julian knew, was to ensure the human ambassador was certifiably, unquestionably, dead. Julian lay still, his breath a shallow, ragged thing that scraped his throat. He let his body go limp, feigning the finality of death. His suit's internal HUD flickered, a cascade of red warnings. Thermal shunt successful. Stasis field depleted. Structural integrity 28%. Life support critical. Oxygen reserves 12 minutes. His first thought wasn't of survival, but of opportunity. The plan was in ruins, but a new one was forming in its place. His eyes slitted open, darted to the side, scanning the chaos. He saw it. The Silene's data puck, lying unnoticed just a few feet away, its surface reflecting the chaos of the room. That was now Objective 1. A Grovic leaned over him, its heavy, cloven feet thudding on the floor next to his head. Its piggish eyes scanned for signs of life, and its breath, a foul stench of spoiled protein and metabolic stimulants, washed over him.
He's gone, the brute grunted to his squad leader. Right to a crisp. Nothing left.
The leader nodded, his rifle held at a low ready, his gaze sweeping the chamber for any other threats.
Make sure. The Viceroy wants confirmation, not assumption. Follow the procedure.
The first Grovic drew a thick, wicked-looking vibro knife, its edge humming with disruptive energy. This was the moment. As the Grovic brought the knife down for a confirmatory stab to the heart, Julian moved, not with a warrior's roar, but with a cold, economical motion. He twisted, agony flaring in his chest like a detonating star, and as the blade plunged deep into his suit's ruined shoulder armor, his hand snaked out, snatching the data puck from the floor. He palmed it, a smooth, cool weight in his hand, just as the Grovic realized its mistake. The human wasn't a corpse. It was alive. The knife was stuck for a precious half-second in the dense matrix of silk steel and cooling gel. It was all the time he needed. Julian's right hand shot out, not to punch, but to grip the Grovic's knife hand. His fingers found the nerve cluster at the wrist, a pressure point he remembered from the anatomical chart 4B of his xenocombat studies. He squeezed, applying all his strength to that single point. The Grovic grunted, its grip faltering as its hand went numb. With his other hand, Julian reached down to his own boot, his fingers finding the familiar handle of the slim 9-inch blade of diamond laminate composite tucked inside. The Grovik tried to bring its massive weight to bear, to crush the life of the defiant human. It was like trying to pin down a striking snake. Julian used the brute's own momentum, rolling with it and driving his own knife up under its armored chin, a spot unprotected by its helmet. The blade severed the spinal cord with a wet, grinding crunch. The Grovik collapsed, a dead weight on top of him. The other enforcers were just now realizing what had happened.
"He's alive! Kill him!"
The leader barked, his voice cutting through the din. Julian shoved the corpse off, yanking the Grovik's vibro knife free from his own shoulder with a gasp of pain. He surged to his feet, a ghost of violence cloaked in a ruined diplomatic suit. The stolen datapunk now safely tucked away in an inner pocket. The Grovik leader raised his plasma rifle. Julian didn't try to close the distance or run. He dove, rolling behind a heavy, ornate planter as a bolt of plasma sizzled the air where his head had been, turning the alien fern within to instant ash. He snatched the heavy pistol from his first victim's hip, thumbed the safety off, a common court-vast design, easy to operate, and came up firing. His plasma bolt struck the leader's knee. He hadn't aimed for the chest. The armor there was thickest. As the brute fell with a scream, its uncontrolled trigger pull stitched a line of plasma bolts across the ceiling, raining down molten debris and forcing a second Grovik to dive for cover. That single second was all Julian needed. He closed the distance to the third Grovik, who was charging with a clumsy, powerful swing of his rifle butt. Julian sidestepped the rifle whistling past his ear and drove the point of the captured vibro knife into the soft spot where the Grovik's neck met its armored collar. He didn't wait for the body to fall. He was already moving. The second Grovik was getting back to its feet. Julian was there, slamming the butt of the heavy pistol against the side of its helmet with enough force to crack the visor and stun the creature, and finishing the job with a brutal, dispassionate strike that left no room for error. He stood for a moment, breathing heavily, the pain in his chest a roaring fire. The remaining Council security forces were in complete disarray, unsure whether to contain the panicked delegates or deal with the diplomat who refused to die. In the spreading confusion, Julian Kador, the man who was supposed to be a smear of carbon on the floor, slipped away into the station's maintenance corridors, leaving behind 4 dead enforcers and a galaxy's worth of trouble. The maintenance corridor was a different world, a maze of humming conduits, dripping pipes, and the low thrum of the station's lifeblood. The air was thick with the smell of recycled lubricants and metallic dust. Julian leaned against a cold bulkhead, the chill of the metal a small comfort against the searing pain in his side. He activated his suit's shielded tight beam comms unit, routing the signal through 3 separate civilian relays to mask its origin. A moment later, General Isolde Valor's face materialized in a small hollow projection, etched with disbelief and horror.
"Julian? My God! The report said the live feed cut, but they said you were dead, vaporized."
The reports were overly optimistic, General. Julian rasped, the words catching in his throat. He coughed and tasted blood. The Council tried to assassinate a human diplomat, overtly, in their own house. Valor's face tightened, the lines around her eyes deepening. We saw the energy spike. We thought it was a reactor malfunction, an accident. It was an accident Kier planned very carefully, Julian corrected. He sent a cleanup crew to make sure. They're not cleaning anymore. He could see the furious calculation in her eyes, the mind of a grand strategist grappling with a crisis that had just gone critical.
"Julian, you need to stand down. Find a secure location. We'll try to get an extraction team to you, but the station is on lockdown. It will take time."
Julian almost laughed, but the motion sent a fresh wave of agony through his ribs. Extraction? General, the time for hiding is over. They broke the rules. I'm going on the offensive.
"Offensive? With what?"
Her voice was strained, not just with concern for him, but with a deeper desperation.
Julian, you're one man. Earth's fleet is a tenth the size of the Council's combined forces. If we protest this, Kier will use your actions as the perfect pretext to label us a hostile power. He'll have the political capital to bottle us up in Sol for centuries.
The desperation in her voice was for their entire species.
The Chimera program, it was a Hail Mary, a monstrosity. We poured everything we had into you. The psych conditioning, the intense training, it had a 98% fatality rate, Julian. It was monstrous. We shut it down after you. There are no more agents like you. You are literally all we have out there. We cannot lose you.
The revelation hit him harder than the energy beam. A 98% fatality rate? He wasn't just the first graduate. He was the only survivor. A walking miracle built on a graveyard of failures. A testament to humanity's desperate willingness to sacrifice its own in the dark. He looked down at his scorched, broken suit. Valor was right. Earth had to play by the Council's rules, to be the reasonable party. But the Council had just shown him that the rules were a cage, built only for the weak. "With all due respect, General," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerously calm level, a tone she had only heard in his final simulation reports. Their rules just changed. He cut the connection before she could argue, leaving her staring at static. He was alone, a ghost asset, disavowed by necessity. But he had an objective, and now he had a plan. Contingency 9 was designed for failure. It was designed for this. Navigating the station's underbelly was second nature. His conditioning included the schematics of every major station type in the galaxy. He recognized the Grummock core insignia on a power conduit, recalling from his studies that their junctions were always poorly shielded and, more importantly, rarely patrolled. He moved with a grim purpose, the pain a constant companion he had long learned to compartmentalize. He followed a memorized route to Subsector 4, a forgotten corner of the station's diplomatic quarter, a place of dusty, unused offices and flickering lights. Here, behind a false panel in a janitorial closet, was Diplomatic Cache 9. He disabled the outer lock with a pulse from his credential spoofer, which still had enough power for one last trick. Inside was a biometric scanner keyed to his DNA. He pressed his bloody thumb against it. With a soft hiss of depressurizing air, a small, shielded case was revealed. His severance package. Inside lay a sterile medkit, a few pieces of untraceable microtech, a high-capacity power cell, and a small, impossibly dense ingot of metal that seemed to absorb the light, its surface a faint, internal gray. Neutronium. Earth couldn't afford to throw planet-sized money around, but it could afford to cede one high-stakes poker chip for its most valuable and only asset. His credentials now blacklisted across the station, he made his way to a smuggler's impound bay in the freight sector, a place where ships were held in a legal gray area, awaiting fines to be paid or bribes to be delivered. He was examining a gyro-class light freighter named the Unsolicited Opinion, a ship that looked less like a spacefaring vessel and more like a collection of mismatched parts that had lost a fight with a larger ship, when a voice cut through the silence.
"Hey, that's my ship you're molesting."
A tall, lean gyro, holding a massive hydrospanner, stood in the doorway. The gyro were a species of hardy scavengers and traders known for their sharp tongues and even sharper survival instincts. Her 4 black eyes took in his state, the ruined suit, the way he held himself to keep his broken ribs from shifting, the grim set of his jaw.
"You've got 5 seconds to explain why I shouldn't use your head to test the structural integrity of this spanner."
He couldn't fight her, but he was injured, exhausted, and out of time. So he switched tactics from diplomat to killer, and now to client. "I need to get off this station," he said, his voice a low rasp. "And then I need to get very, very angry in a number of different star systems." The gyro, Zabella, cocked her head, her lower set of eyes narrowing.
"A lot of people want to get off station right now, especially after that accident in the Grand Chamber. What makes you so special?"
Instead of answering, Julian opened the case he carried. He took out the neutronium ingot and tossed it to her. She caught it with her upper left hand, her arm dipping with the unexpected, shocking weight. All four of her eyes widened. It was untraceable, universally accepted, and worth enough to buy a small moon with a decent atmosphere. "This is a down payment," Julian said. "Get me where I need to go, keep this rust bucket flying. And there's more, a lot more. You in?" Isabella stared at the ingot, then back at the man in the ruined suit. He was the kind of trouble that got you spaced by a council patrol. He was a walking death sentence. But he was also the kind of trouble that paid in neutronium. Her life was a long string of dodging creditors and running low on fuel. This was a way out. This was a new beginning. She set the hydrospanner down with a heavy, resonant clang. "Fine, but you bleed on the upholstery? I'm charging you extra." She jerked her head toward the cockpit with a flick of her horned chin. "Get in, suit. Let's go give someone our unsolicited opinion." Aboard the unsolicited opinion, the reek of overheated circuits and burnt insulation clung to the recycled air. As Isabella piloted them away from the station with a daredevil's skill that belied the ship's dilapidated appearance, expertly faking a garbage scow's transponder code, Julian worked. He stripped off the ruined remains of his diplomatic suit and, after a painful session of self-administered medical care, he interfaced the stolen Silene data puck with the ship's surprisingly powerful computer. "What's on the magic hockey puck?" Isabella asked, her upper eyes focused on the starfield while her lower pair monitored the ship's groaning systems. "Don't know yet. The encryption is Silene governmental standard, layered, computationally dense, and annoyingly sentimental." He worked, his hands moving in a blur, one peeling back layers of Silene code that resolved into poetic, philosophical keys, while the other cross-referenced financial markers against a databank of known corporate shells he had memorized during his training. Minutes later, the final layer of encryption fell away. Files bloomed on the screen, a web of connections and transactions. It was not just research for a proposed audit. It was a treasure trove of back-channel financial data, a detailed map of illicit cash flows and shell corporations. "The council is a web," Julian explained, his voice gaining strength as the plan solidified, as the pain was supplanted by cold purpose. "Kier is the spider at its center. You can't just kill the spider. The web will remain, and another spider will take its place. You have to burn the web, strand by strand, until the spider falls. Our first stop," Julian said, pulling up a file on a bloated, self-satisfied Grovik with extensive business holdings, "is Counselor Borel. He's Kier's primary financial launderer. According to this, all of Kier's slush funds, his bribes, his Black Ops funding get washed through Borel's businesses." Isabella glanced at the file, at the sneering face of the Grovik. "Let me guess. A high-stakes gladiator arena on some neon-drenched cesspool of a world." Julian smiled thinly. "The blood pit of Hesperos. We're not going to blow it up. Kier would expect that. Brute force is his language." "So what then?" Isabella asked, a flicker of genuine interest in her lower eyes. "You gonna talk him to death? Bore him into submission?" "Something like that," Julian said. "We're going to engage in a little guerrilla diplomacy." Isabella snorted a laugh, a dry, rattling sound from her throat. "Guerrilla diplomacy? I like it. Sounds expensive." She punched in the coordinates for Hesperos, and the ship's temperamental FTL drive lurched, stretching the stars into long, thin lines of light. The first domino was about to fall. Hesperos was an assault on the senses, a world trapped in a perpetual neon-drenched night. Towering holographic advertisements for everything from military-grade cybernetics to illicit narcotics flickered and fought for dominance in the rain-slicked sky. Isabella landed the unsolicited opinion in a grimy, unlicensed port and stayed with her ship and her down payment, making upgrades. Julian, meanwhile, clad in anonymous drab spacer's gear, headed for the grimy surface tunnels beneath the city. His target was the arena's undefeated champion, a Scaran warrior named Draken. Julian found him in a stark gray training chamber, the air smelling of sweat and ozone. The massive reptilian, a mountain of scarred muscle and cold focus, was practicing with a pair of heavy serrated blades, his two sets of arms moving in a complete, deadly dance.
"The betting floor is upstairs, little man,"
Draken growled without turning, his voice a low rumble. "I'm not here to place a bet, champion," Julian said, his voice calm. "I'm here to offer you a new contract." Draken stopped, turning slowly. He was even more imposing up close.
"I have a contract with Lord Boral."
"A contract that has made him rich," Julian countered. He activated a small, handheld projector, casting the files from the silene data puck onto the grimy wall. It showed Boral's accounting in damning, undeniable detail. "He's been skimming 70% of your earnings since your first victory. He gives you enough to feel wealthy, to live like a king within these walls, while he builds an empire on your blood and sweat." Draken stared at the data, at the flowcharts showing credits being siphoned off into shell corporations. His massive frame was rigid, his upper hands clenched into fist.
"He lies,"
he hissed. But the doubt was a seed already sprouting in the fertile soil of a warrior's pride. "Does he?" Julian asked softly. "He tells you you're a champion, a living legend, but you're just his prize in a gilded cage. He even owns the copyright to the name Draken. You're his property." Julian stepped closer. "You help me, and I'll give you his entire operation. The arena, the contracts, the broadcast rights, everything. I don't want it. I just want Boral ruined. I want to cut one of the strings that holds up the spider in the center of the web." Draken looked from the glowing, irrefutable evidence on the wall to the strange, determined human in the cheap spacer's clothes. This was not about money. This was about pride. It was about freedom. It was about owning his own name.
"What do I have to do?"
Draken asked, his voice a low, dangerous growl. Julian smiled, a cold, sharp thing. "Just give the performance of your life." The championship match was a bedlam. The air in the blood pit was thick with the smell of spilled drinks, cooked meat, and bloodlust. In a lavish, armored skybox overlooking the sand, Counselor Boral sat like a bloated king, surrounded by sycophants. Down in the arena, Draken fought like never before. His opponent, a hulking, cybernetically enhanced brawler, was formidable, but Draken was a storm of focused rage. He dismantled his opponent with a cold, brutal display of skill, his forearms a whirlwind of blocks, parries, and devastating strikes. The crowd roared for the final killing blow. Instead, Draken planted his blades in the sand and turned to face Boral's skybox. He raised all four arms, calling for silence.
"People of Hesperos,"
his amplified voice boomed across the arena.
"You have come here for the pure honesty of combat. But the man you enrich with your wagers knows nothing of honesty. Lord Boral, he's a thief."
On cue, on every jumbotron and holoscreen in the arena, the financial charts from the silene puck appeared, simplified by Julian into easily digestible graphics showing a river of credits flowing from Draken's winnings into Boral's off-world accounts. The crowd, a mob of gamblers and drinkers who understood being cheated better than anything, felt the sting of betrayal. A low murmur turned into a roar of outrage. The riot started in the upper decks and spread like fire. In the ensuing chaos, Julian and a team of Draken's most loyal gladiators liberated Boral's vault. Julian, an artist of financial warfare, didn't just steal the credits. He dismantled the empire, He transferred every credit from Boral's accounts into a new, publicly auditable one in Draken's name, broadcasting the transaction confirmation for the mob to see. He voided all of Boral's predatory fighter contracts and posted them publicly. He didn't kill Boral. He left him broke, humiliated, and at the mercy of a planet full of people he had cheated for years. The first strand of Kier's web had been spectacularly and publicly burned.
That was surprisingly effective,
Isabella admitted back on the ship, watching news feeds of the ongoing riots on Hesperos.
You didn't throw a single punch yourself.
The most effective weapon is the one your enemy doesn't know you have, Julian replied, already deep into the Silene data again. Boral was a financial artery. Now we go for the nervous system. He pointed to a desolate, ice-crusted asteroid on the star chart. Kier's primary communications relay, all his secret correspondence, his blackmail, his orders to his agents, it all gets routed through a heavily encrypted server farm on this rock. Isabella zoomed in. The asteroid bristled with automated defense turrets and sensor arrays.
A direct assault is suicide.
Not if the vacuum is screaming, Julian said, pointing to a stellar weather chart. The asteroid is about to pass through the edge of a massive ion storm. For a few hours, it'll create a sensor shadow wide enough to hide a cruiser. Isabella's lower eyes lit up with a pilot's excitement.
If we match the ion wake exactly, their long-range sensors will read us as a ghost echo, a sensor flare. It's insane.
She ran a simulation, the computer spitting out terrifyingly low probability figures.
It gives us a 90-second window to get from the edge of the shadow to the hull. Any deviation and we're scrap metal.
90 seconds is all I need, Julian said. You get me to the hull, I'll do the rest. Flying into the ion storm's wake was like trying to surf a tsunami made of pure energy. Alarms screamed through the cockpit as the unsolicited opinion was battered by rogue particle waves.
70 seconds on the clock,
Isabella yelled over the den, her forearms a blur on the controls, coaxing the ship through the chaos.
That's as close as I can get you. Go, go, go!
Julian launched himself from the airlock, a silent projectile in a void-blackened pressure suit, landing on the communication station with a soft magnetic clang of his boots. He moved quickly, a wraith against the station's metallic hull, toward a maintenance hatch indicated on the schematics he'd memorized. He bypassed the lock with a high-frequency scrambler from his cache. He was inside. The corridors were cold, sterile, and patrolled by elite Scythian Praetorian guards. He moved like a phantom, taking down the first guard from behind with a silent nerve pinch to the base of the skull. The second was trickier, a two-man patrol. He waited for them to pass a junction, then tossed a heavy wrench he'd taken from Isabella's ship down the opposite corridor. As one went to investigate the clatter, Julian descended on the other from an overhead gantry. In the brief, silent scuffle, the guard's helmet cracked against a power conduit console. A tiny red light flashed on the panel. A silent, localized alarm had been triggered. He finished the guard, but stealth was blown. He had seconds. He had to create a bigger problem. He ripped the panel off the power conduit and jammed his knife into the regulator, shorting it out. Then he ran. Seconds later, the conduit overloaded with a blinding flash and a deafening bass-heavy roar that echoed through the station. Alarms blared, emergency bulkheads slammed shut, guards scrambled, and in the widespread chaos, Julian slipped away, heading toward the central data core. The data core was a massive spherical chamber suspended in the center of a larger room by powerful magnetic containment fields. The overload had drawn most of the guards, but a few sentinels remained, weapons ready. He couldn't fight them all. Instead, he found the control room for the magnetic field and, disguised as a technician responding to the power surge, activated the emergency maintenance routine. As the guards watched in confusion, the massive data core descended slowly into its maintenance cradle. Julian was already there, hidden in a service trench beneath the floor. As a shielded service port aligned with his position, he reached up and attached his data puck. The download began. This wasn't the Silene's research. This was Kier's own encrypted contingency folder. Blackmail on the entire Galactic Council, from financial indiscretions to assassination plots. It was the suicide pill of an empire. Download complete. He yanked the puck free. As a parting shot, he leaked a single, deeply embarrassing file about one of Kier's most loyal allies, detailing his secret obsession with pre-spaceflight human soap operas to the Galactic Newsnet. So more chaos. "Isabella, I'm coming out," he subvocalized. "Northern landing pad, now!"
"They're scrambling fighters,"
her voice crackled back, thick with static.
"You've really kicked the hive."
He burst onto the landing pad just as the unsolicited opinion swooped down, its single laser cannon scattering the guards who were taking up positions. He dove inside as the ramp retracted, and Isabella threw the ship into a gut-wrenching climb, jumping to FTL just as the first fighter's energy bolts stitched across the space they had just occupied, leaving a thoroughly violated communications hub in their wake. It took 2 sleepless rotations, but he cracked the encryption. He stared at the decrypted archive, a galaxy's worth of filth laid bare. It was more powerful than a fleet of dreadnoughts.
"That's a lot of dirty laundry,"
Isabella said, peering over his shoulder, whistling low.
"What's the play? Release it all? Watch the galaxy burn?"
"No. An inferno is indiscriminate," Julian said, his eyes hollow with fatigue but burning with intensity. "I prefer a targeted strike, the final act of guerrilla diplomacy." He sent an open, unencrypted broadcast to Viceroy Kier, an invitation to a final negotiation at an abandoned trade platform in the desolate Enoch system. Then, he began sending private, carefully curated messages to every other council member. Each message contained a sample of their own blackmail file and a simple, chilling addendum. "A dead man's switch is now active. The full archive is linked to my biodata. If I die, or if High Counselor Kier is not held accountable for his actions against a recognized diplomatic envoy, it all goes public. The choice is yours." He had turned the spider's own web into its prison. As they approached the Enoch system, Julian prepared. Isabella had patched his original suit with ship-grade plating scavenged from a derelict fighter. It was an ugly, functional monstrosity.
"Look, word man,"
she said, her tone unusually serious as she tightened the final bolt on the shoulder plate.
"The plates will stop a punch, maybe a slug. They offer 0 protection against energy weapons. That fancy gel weave, the stasis field, it's shot. Don't expect any more miracles."
He put on the suit. It was heavy, stiff, and vulnerable. Perfect. It showed them exactly what they had done to him. He walked to the airlock. Time to finish the speech. Julian stood alone on the skeletal trade platform, a ghost of rust and forgotten commerce drifting in the dark. Kier arrived on a sleek military shuttle with a dozen Praetorian guards, their Scythian honorifics gleaming on their polished armor. "Ambassador Kadar," Kier began, his voice dripping with condescension as he strode down the shuttle's ramp. "Did you wish to surrender personally? To beg for your insignificant species?" "I'm here to accept yours, Kier," Julian replied calmly, his voice carrying across the empty platform. Kier laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Human arrogance is truly boundless. I command fleets. I command the law. I command this galaxy." "You command nothing," Julian said, a cold, pitying smile touching his lips. "Your law is fear, and your subjects are about to mutiny. By the way, the rest of the council is watching this broadcast. They know about my dead man switch. They're waiting for you to fail so they have a reason to cut you loose." As if on cue, Kier's personal datapad, held by a nearby aide, began to chime, a cascade of frantic, panicked messages from his allies, each one a nail in his political coffin. His power base was evaporating in real time. Kier's regal composure finally cracked.
For 10,000 years, my family line has maintained this order, he shrieked, his voice losing its modulated calm. An order that keeps lesser species like yours from burning the galaxy to cinders in your infantile rage. What I did for civilization.
He drew a shimmering energy blade from his belt.
I will kill you myself. I will pry the data from your dead hands. Kill him!
The Praetorians attacked, but Julian had studied the platform schematics. He had planned for this. He slammed his fist on a nearby maintenance panel. A high-pressure torrent of corrosive fire suppression foam erupted from the nozzles in the ceiling, a substance designed to eat through ship hulls. It wasn't just blinding. It melted the armor of the first wave of guards. They shrieked as their suits dissolved and the corrosive agent found their flesh. He sprinted along a gantry, 2 guards in hot pursuit. He slid under a massive, dormant cargo claw, slapping a magnetic charge onto its control unit as he passed. He vaulted over a railing onto a lower level, and as the guards followed, he triggered the charge. The mass of steel hands spasmed to life, its fingers grabbing one guard and crushing him in its grip, while the back of the hand swept the other off the platform and into the silent blackness. Julian was now facing 5. He used the Grovik pistol not to kill, but to herd them with carefully placed shots, forcing them onto a large, graded section of the floor. They advanced, weapons ready, confident in their numbers. Julian fired his last shot at a junction box on the wall beside them. The box controlled the platform's powerful electromagnetic docking clamps. It exploded in a shower of sparks, and a wave of raw magnetic energy pulsed through the floor. The guards, clad in ferrous metal armor, were slammed violently to the deck, their movements hopelessly impeded as they were pinned by their own weight and the magnetic field. Julian walked past them, leaving them for the Council's incoming forces to clean up. Only 2 were left, flanking Kier, the Viceroy's personal guard. They attacked together, a whirlwind of trained violence. This would be a fight. He dodged the first guard's energy staff, the weapon crackling the deck where he stood. He drove his knife into the guard's unarmored side, but the second guard was on him, tackling him to the ground. The impact was brutal, knocking the air from his lungs. The guard raised a vibro blade for the kill. Julian, pinned, could only raise his arm. The blade slammed down, shearing through Zabella's crude metal patch and biting deep into his forearm. He roared in pain, a raw, animal sound, but the opening was there. He twisted, using his legs to throw the guard off balance, and finished him with a desperate, brutal strike to the throat. He staggered to his feet, bleeding freely from his arm, his patched suit in tatters. Only Kier remained. The duel was brutally short. Kier was a fencer, a duelist of the old school. Julian was a wounded animal, running on hate and adrenaline. Kier lunged, his energy blade a streak of light. Julian parried with his knife, the clash sending a shower of sparks and a jolt of agony up his injured arm. Kier pressed his attack, a feint, then a slash. The energy blade came at Julian's chest. He tried to dodge, but he was too slow, too hurt. The blade sliced across his ribs, searing through the ruined silk steel fabric as if it were paper. The pain was blinding, and he stumbled back, his vision swimming with black spots. This was the opening Kier had been waiting for. He lunged in for the killing blow, a triumphant sneer on his face. But the stagger was exactly what Julian needed. It put him inside Kier's reach. As the energy blade came for his heart, Julian pivoted, slamming his body into Kier's. His left hand clamped onto Kier's wrist, twisting it with the last of his strength. The energy blade fell, clattering on the deck. With his right hand, Julian pressed the cold, flat side of his knife against Kier's throat. It was over. Kier stood there, disarmed, defeated, panting in shock and humiliation, the human's hot blood dripping onto his pristine uniform. Julian leaned in close, his voice a low, chilling whisper, broadcast for the entire council to hear. I'm not here to kill you, Kier. That would make you a martyr. I'm here to erase you. He stepped back, lowering his knife, and left the former High Counselor standing there, utterly broken, exposed, and powerless. Julian turned and walked away, each step an agony. He heard another shuttle approaching, forces sent by his now former colleagues, coming to collect their own trash. News alerts were already flooding the Galactic net. The image that accompanied them was a grainy shot from the platform's security feed. The lone human ambassador, his makeshift armor in shreds, his arm bleeding freely, turning his back on the defeated leader of the galaxy. The old order was dead. In its place was chaos. In its place was a chance. Back on the unsolicited opinion, Julian was peeling off the ruined suit as Isabella, her usual sarcastic demeanor replaced by a grudging respect, patched his arm with a dermal regenerator.
"You've made a mess," she said,
though a grin touched her lips.
"Draken sent you a thank you bonus. Says business is booming and Lord Boral is currently employed as his spittoon cleaner."
A priority message alert chimed. It was General Valor. Her face appeared, filled with a profound, weary pride.
"Good work, Ambassador,"
she said, the formal title now carrying a new weight.
"The Council is in shambles. They're practically begging us to help mediate a new charter. They're terrified of us now. Of you."
She took a deep breath, the first easy one she'd likely taken in days.
"Your new orders from Earth Command are to do whatever you think is best. The leash is off, Julian. Earth is behind you."
For the first time since he had woken up on a cold slab as the sole survivor of the Chimera program, Julian Kador permitted himself a small, genuine smile. He wasn't a ghost anymore. He was a free agent, a force of nature. He ended the call and looked over at Isabella, who was busy using a small anti-grav unit to lift her now significantly larger ingot of neutronium. "So," he said, the pain in his body a dull throb against a rising tide of purpose. "Where to next?" Isabella looked up, a wide, predatory grin spreading across her face. It was the expression of someone who had just been handed a universe of possibilities on a silver platter.
"Anywhere we want, Wordman,"
she said.
"Anywhere we want."
The unsolicited opinion banked, its engines flaring with the newfound power from Isabella's upgrades. With a flash of light, it jumped to FTL, a tiny, defiant ship disappearing into an endless field of stars, ready to find out what came next.